Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are going to be drawing something a little easier than last time because last episode was quite challenging. So I wanted to give myself something a little easier. So today we're drawing Goblin Queen, a character who I don't really have to worry about much in terms of color because there's only like 3 colors. And I don't have to worry about much in terms of design because, well, let's face it, there's not much there. So, yeah. On that particular note, we're drawing a slightly different version of the design. It's something closer to the X-Men 97 design, where there's a little bit more going on just to sort of keep it interesting for me. But there's a few slight adjustments and changes I've made to that. I'll talk about those in a bit. But mostly what we're going to be talking about today is going to sort of be... We're going to be talking about posing, going to be talking about all those sorts of normal things. Posing is sort of the big one today. Because we've got quite a bit to talk about in terms of that regard, just in terms of little tiny bits that sort of build upon each other. But yeah, so I will roll the intro and then I'll show you what I have. So yeah. So right, this is where we are. As I mentioned, the design here is much closer to the X-Men 97 one than, say, the classic design. The classic design, very simple. But it's not really what we're going for here. Just, again, this looks more interesting to me. So this is what we're going for. So a few little things which I think are different is I've added in certain extra lines and stuff like that. Like there's these sort of lines built into the corset. There's these sorts of little bits of trim that go along and around and sort of form in some of these more these shapes and things like that into it. The arms and the boots are still fairly simple. I added in some of these sort of little bits of trim and things like that to the boots and things like that as well. So it just, again, little tiny accenting things just sort of add a little bit more. The cape, I didn't change much, but we'll talk a bit more about that in a second because that goes into the posing thing. I made her fingernails a bit long. I don't know if that's necessarily a part of the design. I don't really remember, to be honest. But yeah. So, realistically, the design's not that changed. It's more or less the X-Men 97 one with a few minor little changes here or there. So yeah, posing. So, overall, the pose, fairly simple. She's just sort of walking forward, her head is tilted back, and her hands are out. Now, there's not going to be any crazy effects or anything like that I'm doing. I might do some sort of lighting effects later. We'll think about that. That's something I'm probably not going to get done in this session, because this is most likely going to be to a recording sort of deal. But that's besides the point. Yeah. I might do some effects or something like that. I'll have to think about it, but it's not really a focus of this. Posing is more what we're going for here. So again, as I mentioned, the pose is fairly simple. She's sort of walking forward, one hand is going back, one hand is going forward. It's sort of a sort of basic kind of outward pose, fairly simple stuff. One leg down, one leg back. But a lot of the things that sort of make the pose look a lot more interesting is sort of what I want to talk about here, is accenting that pose with extra little bits and pieces. Things like with this hand, you have certain fingers overlapping. The middle finger is behind the ring finger. The ring finger is curling forward, as with the pinky. The fingers are sort of steadily going back further, and then the thumb is out. It's the same sort of thing here. The fingers are curling up. They're a little thin. I might need to change that a little bit here. Some of these fingers are a little thin looking. And then things like with the hair sort of falls down and covers parts of it. Again, the hair is different than the X-Men 97 design. This is closer to the original design. Of where it sort of parts very far over and then falls down a little bit in front of the face. And so a lot of the way the hair sort of curls out and falls. You've got bits here covering the ear, you've got bits here covering the edge of the cape, and it sort of then falls down behind, and then you've got this one long curl here which curls across the little gem here and then falls down into the middle of the chest. There's things like that, the way the cape swoops up over the shoulder and then tucks back. And then the cape is one of the ones which actually I'm most happy with here, is the way the cape sort of curls and folds. Because drawing a cape can be very challenging. Not even challenging, it can be time consuming and just a bit of a pain, the way to draw it. Especially here because this is a cape which also has rips in it. So the way that I did this is I formed it into sort of sections, and then I sort of then just put a little loop between them, because that then sort of adds to the flow. So the cape is sort of bunching up a little bit as it's falling back, and so that's creating more visual mess, which is sort of good here, sort of what we want. Because yeah, you've got this sort of outer bit of the cape here, which is coming down, and then the other edge of the cape, which is coming down from this shoulder, as you can see there, and it's sort of tucking in, and then coming back out like this, and then curling forward. And so then you've got the way the cape falls, being that it's sort of dipping in here, and then it's got a few little bits which are sort of flowing back a little bit. Again, you have to bear in mind this cape is ripped, so certain ways bits of these bits of fabric are going to flow is going to alter because of the rips. It's not going to fall super rigidly. Certain parts that are ripped are then going to go further back, and certain bits are going to come forward more, so it's going to sort of alter that the way that it folds because of the rips. And so then again, you've got this part over here which tucks really far back, as that's where it has to curl. It logically has to curl in a certain way there, so this has to go all the way back like that. And likewise, this bit's coming forward and down, so then therefore this needs to come forward quite a bit in the middle here. And that's just sort of these little things that add quite a bit to a pose. They can do a lot for a pose. It's things like this, these little additive, little accenting zones. Things like the hair, again, the way that the hair sort of curls and falls and all this, and has all these different little areas that sort of tucks in behind everything. And then you've got the cape that sort of again tucks in and sort of flies out and all this stuff. And again, another thing here being the movement of the pose adds a lot here, is that with the cape that adds quite a bit more, because if you just sort of try your best to at least remove the cape from your mind here when you're looking at this, what you're seeing is a fairly basic sort of slightly walking pose. It's not much, it's not that interesting. The pose itself is sort of, again, it's standard as I mentioned earlier on. It's not too crazy, it's all these little accenting elements that add quite a bit to it. So, when you reintroduce the cape into your mind, it adds this sort of whole layer of movement where it sort of adds this sort of, again, as I say, the third layer, a little bit more depth and dimension to things as they're moving. As it sort of goes out like this, and then it sort of then touches near the end of the frame. And again, a thing which some artists would do is they would put her all the way over here, and then you'd make the cape really long, and that sort of has a similar effect. But that's not really what I wanted here. I want to sort of keep the subject center frame. That's usually what I do with all these. Is subject remains center frame, or off to side on one of the sides. I usually would prefer center frame, is usually what I go for. That's my preference generally, is center frame subject. And yeah, and then with the hair, now the hair doesn't sort of fly back. It sort of all sort of plumes out in all these different directions, but that definitely sort of, again, you could say that it could just be, yeah, I mean, with the way that the feet are, you could say that she's just taken a step, and so therefore the cape sort of flies out, and then the hair bounces outwards as well, because whenever someone walks, especially if you've got very long hair, your hair bounces. That's the sort of, whenever you're moving, that happens. So therefore you could say that the reason why the hair is sort of out a little bit more is because, again, she's just taken a step, and therefore hair out. Hair's bounced out, as with, again, the cape. And so, yeah. Now, another thing to mention is the sort of face shape. I will be changing this a little bit, I'd say. Initially, whenever I was drawing this, I tried to make her look a little bit more similar to whenever I drew Phoenix a while ago at this point. I tried to make her face a little bit more similar to that, but I sort of gave up halfway through because I was like, this ain't working. And mostly just because the sort of features that I was dealing with, that I had initially started to lay in, weren't similar enough to really work with that, and I didn't really want to start all the way over. So I stuck with this. Some of the facial features will be changing here a little bit, because there's a little bit too much sort of space, a little bit too much head here for how little face we have going on. And yeah, certain things like her upper lip should be a little thinner, but given the fact this is low angle, you're seeing more of that and less of the bottom lip, so therefore they look to be roughly the same size here, even though the bottom lip would be quite large versus the top lip, which would be quite thin if you were looking at a flat sort of straight on shot. And then again, I've got things like, I like to have the eyebrow visible even through the hair. The thing that certain artists will do is, if like you've got hair covering a character's face, you can still see an eyebrow and the shape of their eye through it, even though it's not actually visible. It's just a thing that some artists do to sort of give you the impression of it being, again, like you can sort of see through the hair. That sort of idea is, I think, sort of what some artists go for in that respect. But yeah, so yeah, I actually thought to myself, I didn't think about it, but I don't think she has any earrings or anything like that. I only thought about it now, but yeah. Anyways, this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, these sorts of facial features need to change a little bit. There's a little bit too much face going on for, again, versus how small her features actually are. So I might make the eyebrows a little longer and then the eyes slightly bigger and things like that, because the mouth, I think, is fine. Maybe even could make it slightly wider, but it's not supposed to be like a big wide smile. It's supposed to be like a small smile. So I think that works. I think that shape works. The cheekbones are fine with the emphasis on those. It's just sort of, yeah, like naturally, because again, what we're seeing here is low angle, therefore you're seeing more of the bottom of the head versus the top, so therefore things actually sort of thin out a little bit because of, again, the perspective that you're looking at things from. So therefore, again, you're seeing a lot more chin. So effectively, if I put in like a tiny little line like just there, like that would be the sort of very bottom of the chin, and then this would be the flat of it that I'd be laying in. I probably won't do that just because this is supposed to be a rounder sort of chin, so you wouldn't really be seeing that defined sort of arch at the bottom of it to say, oh, this is the dent at the bottom of the chin, just to sort of separate it from the flat of your jaw and then the actual bottom of your chin. You would sort of separate those things a little bit more depending on the sort of shape of someone's face. But yeah, I think I have rambled long enough. I've been talking for about 12 minutes here, and I didn't even start this with a topic in mind, so I managed to get quite a bit out of nothing. But yeah, I think I will start actually drawing this. I'll do the details, and then I'll be back to do the colours. Whether or not that's actually part of this session or not is another thing entirely. Anyways, I'll get moving, and then I'll be back. Sort of. So yeah. Alright, that's our details done. I made a few adjustments, a few little bits and pieces that are slightly different. I made her eyes slightly bigger, only slightly. Things like the hair is ever so slightly different. There's like this extra prong to the long piece that falls in front there. Again, these are very minor changes. I narrowed her jaw slightly, I slimmed it out. It was a little broader before, but I sort of just made it a little bit slimmer. Again, these are very minor changes. Little things like that were sort of things that I did. Overall, not much different to what we already discussed, so nothing really to write home about there. So now we get into the colors. The colors should be very easy, given that there's, I would say, well, there's certainly less than 10. There's maybe about 5 colors here that I have to worry about in total. Most of them are very minor. Well, I say most of them, but aside from 2, they're all very minor. It's black and red is the only ones we really have to worry about covering much ground, being the inside of the cape is the red, and then pretty much everything else is black. So I don't have to worry too much about these other bits and pieces. So mostly this shouldn't be too bad. I have a bit of an idea of what I want to do for the background. I'm going to use like a deep red at the top, and then I'm going to have like an orangey red plume up in sort of smoky paint, and have that give it sort of like that sort of fiery look to a degree, something like that. That's sort of what I'm thinking of anyways. Very minimal, nothing too crazy, just to sort of give it a bit more flair to the background, just to sort of give it a little bit more going on. Because and also I think the fire thing obviously makes sense because we're dealing with this character, and I mean the comic that she originally comes from, if memory serves, is Inferno, so it makes a degree of sense that it'd be some sort of fire imagery here. So we'll do something like that, I'd say. Nothing too crazy, pretty simple. For the most part, I'd say this shouldn't be too hard. There might be some lighting stuff that I choose to do later, sort of like under lighting. Maybe that might be interesting, low angle lighting. We'll see. I might have a think about that, because that's something which requires some setup if we're going to do that. So I might have a think about it and see what we'll do. Anyways, I will do these colors, and then I'll be back to do said painted shading. But yeah, is there anything else I really need to cover? I don't think so. I think I'll do the background as part of this section, so it shouldn't be too bad. Everything I'm going to do here, again, as I say, pretty simple. So nothing too crazy, nothing to worry about really. So I will just move on, and I'll be back to do the painted shading and all that other stuff. So yeah. Alright, that's our colours done. Now it is time for the painted shading and all that stuff. So I obviously also did our background stuff, which again was just as simple as getting a paintbrush, running it up the background a few times with a sort of an orange brush, and that was it. A ready orange brush, and just sort of push it up a few times through the thing, and then there you go. That's it, Bob's your uncle, you're done. And yeah, naturally the colours, very simple. Mostly just the very few colors. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 colors. And 2 of those colors are very, very minimal, so realistically I'd even just say 5, because 2 of them we're not even going to be shading here. So yeah, 5 for the purposes of what we're doing here. So yeah, realistically speaking, I was thinking about, I mentioned before that I was thinking about doing the sort of up lighting, but I'm not going to bother with that. I'm going to just sort of have the light over here and then the dark over here. And that's sort of what we're going to go for, is just that. Simple enough, sort of generally simple lighting environment. A lot of the stuff that I wanted to talk about here is stuff that I already talked about at the beginning. And so just sort of want to keep this simple for the most part, because, you know, the last one was hard and this one I want to be easy, so I'm gonna try and make it so. Yeah, is there anything else I really need to go over too much before I just continue? I don't think there is. It's just things like, I suppose, as it relates to color. The colors that you put next to each other influence how your eyes see them. For example, whenever you have someone who has who doesn't necessarily have a pale skin tone, but you put a lot of darker colors around that skin tone, it will make the skin tone look paler. For example, here her skin tone is pale. I did make it pale specifically, but for the fact that it's surrounded by a lot of black here, makes it look lighter in tone. And it's certain things like lighter colors will do the opposite of where you surround it with lighter colors. That will emphasize the coloration of the skin in that sense, or just even just the lighter color, or just the prime color that the lighter colors are surrounding. I.e., here again, this is the prime color that I'm talking about here is the skin tone, and then you surround that with the black, and that makes it look paler. Vice versa, if this was white instead, then the skin tone would look darker. It's just, again, how your eyes perceive these things. It's the same way that, again, I have red, lots of red tones in the background, and the skin here is very red toned whenever I drew it in originally. And so when you see it here, that is now more emphasized. You can see whenever the background is off that it's more obviously red toned. But whenever this goes on, it's a lot less obvious that her skin is red toned. Again, it's obvious that it is, but, you know, it's less, it looks paler, is what I'm trying to say anyways. But yeah, that's sort of the only real note there, which I think is worth covering when it comes down to stuff like that in colors. This is stuff which I think I've mentioned before, but it's worth reiterating this sort of thing every now and then, just for the sake of, you know, making things obvious. But yeah, anyways, I will move on. I'll do these paints and then I'll be back to do the detailed shading. So yeah. Alright, that is our painting done. I think I actually did pretty well this time with the painting. Sometimes the painting, especially if I'm working with sheen, as I did here, can come out a bit funny. Our gradient map will sort of darken this and heighten the contrast a little bit, which is good, that's what we want. So what I did here with the black was something of a sort of a selective sheen. So you can see here that I chose to make certain areas, I sort of made it a lot heavier in certain areas and very light in others. Like there's a very light bit of it in the cape, because the cape shouldn't necessarily be as shiny a material as the rest. So here you can see that these sorts of shapes that come in like this, and they're just little sort of accents, and others, again, it's harder sort of lighting shapes, such as this sort of like, almost like this one that you can see here almost. Down here at the side, and then into the arm, it's just this sort of thin line. In this arm, it's a very, very thin line. On the side over here, it's a very thin line, and then you get along the boots, before it's like nice and thick, and so yeah, again, it varies. I even put a little tiny bit on the gem there, because the gem should probably have a little bit of lighting going on it. But yeah, so again, I chose to make it mild. I didn't want to go too crazy with it. Again, our contrast will go up a little bit when it comes to our detailed shading and our light line, and then once our gradient maps go on, that will heighten the existing contrast, but I think what we've laid in should work pretty well. But yeah, in the interest of sort of just moving along, I'll do the detailed shading. I've already grabbed my colors. I don't need anything more. I already have my colors, so I will just move on. I'll do my detailed shading, I'll do my light line, I'll do the first gradient map, then I'll be back to do the rest of the gradient maps and wrap up. So yeah. Alright, so that is our detailed shading, light line, and first gradient map done. So, the light line actually took a while, because, you know, doing a light line on hair is a bit tricky, because it's a lot of these tiny little lines that you need to have accenting things and such, just in such the right way. And so, yeah, that was the part that really took a while there. And then, again, the problem is we don't want our light line to detract too much from our sort of softer lighting sheen that goes along the side here. Again, it's going to, but we don't want it to detract too much, so I just chose to give things a sort of thick edge, but not much more than that. I would ordinarily sort of dip in a few little places just to sort of give things a bit more depth, but largely I didn't. I just sort of gave them a bit of an edge, and that was it, for the most part. Aside from a few little areas. Well, I didn't even do it on the edge of the brooch there, which, you know, I will actually do, because otherwise that's gonna look a bit weird, I'd say. There. That's good enough. So, right. That is our first gradient map. It's a fairly simple, just ever so slightly purple to ever so slightly orange. It's all red. It's just slight skew on one end, slight skew on the other. It's that simple. Nothing too crazy. Nothing too crazy at all. And so, now we're going to start making our duplicates. I decided to make our primary, the soft light, at 65%, which is a little less than I might ordinarily pick nowadays. I usually go for something a bit more, strong than that. So our luminosity here, it darkens everything that's below. I think we might actually want it above everything this time. Let's set that to 20% and then take another look at it. It emphasizes our purple too much underneath, so I'd say let's put it above. Right, now let's see our color burn. Where do we want this? Above? Middle is nice and bright. Below is a little too high contrast. Above kind of merges everything a little bit. Crunches everything down a little too much. What does it look like in the middle? Definitely reddens a lot of stuff here. You know what, maybe we can put it in the middle. Put it in the middle and just make it really low opacity. It's 5%. It's like a tiny little skew. Maybe I might actually want a lighten layer on this. just to sort of brighten things up a little bit. Really not doing anything. You put it underneath, maybe? Nope, doesn't do anything. Okay. Let's try something else. Instead of lighten, multiply? Not really doing anything. Screen, no, it's too pale. Overlay, no, it's gonna burn everything. Linear, no, these aren't working. Color? No, it's too bland. Hue, no. Saturation, no, that's gone sepia somehow. I don't know why that would turn it sepia. It's weird that it's gone a bit sort of sepia, but then the purple has remained intact. Everything else has gone sort of brown. That's weird. Wouldn't necessarily expect it from a saturation layer, but anyways, I think we're just going to leave it as we had it before. Just 3 gradient maps is probably good enough. It's alright, let's grab our texture, and let's hope that does enough to lighten things up a little bit. Now again, on the screen here, it's a bit more, it's a lot less vivid, so it's less to worry about in that respect. It's just sort of down here on the tablet screen. It's definitely a bit, it's a bit too vivid in certain areas anyways. Certain things I want to sort of remain pale, like the skin tone and stuff like that, so that's something which, I mean, again, we're going with warm lighting, so it's going to get warmer, and so therein lies the problem. Our gradient maps entirely made up of warm colors. So put this to 20% and have a bit of a closer look. Well, it's certainly lightened up some of the face a little bit more, a little bit of the skin. It's not super noticeable on the background, so it's not too bad, I would say. And it's hitting some of our lighter areas kind of right. So, you know, 20% I think is fine on that. It's a little higher than we've normally been going on with the texture recently. Typically I've been making that fairly subtle for the most part. But yeah, that is us, basically. Yeah, that's everything done. So this was an easy enough one, I would say. I kind of covered everything I wanted to talk about pretty much immediately. And again, that's funny given that I didn't have a topic going into this, so I just sort of made it up as I was going along. Surprisingly, one sitting. Technically speaking, it isn't. I had to break it up into 2 recordings because I left at one point. But that's besides the point. Not really necessary information. But yeah, it just means that it made my life a little bit more awkward now in the editing because I now have 2 recordings to splice together rather than just the 1 recording. Anyways, unnecessary information. But yeah, so this one was pretty fun, pretty easy. Again, it's always nice to deal with characters who have a very limited color palette because that just makes the general thing easier to deal with because the coloring, the flat colors, oftentimes can take almost as long as the details if there's enough of them. So this is the thing, if there's a very limited color palette, that generally means that, yeah, it's going to be way faster because, again, not much more that needs to be done then. So, this is the thing. It's, generally speaking, preferential to have limited color palettes, to some respect. You don't need to go too crazy with it. Generally, I would say, I prefer simpler because that's easier. It's just better reading for the eyes as well. It's more easily readable with a limited color palette. But yeah. Anyways, yeah, I think, again, I sort of said everything I needed to say with this. I talked about the posing, I talked about the sort of the nitty-gritty details, talked about the design stuff, I talked about the lighting, which I didn't really use much of, so makes no difference. And yeah, I sort of talked about everything I wanted to, so I may as well just, start wrapping up. Yeah, I enjoyed it well enough. This was a fun one, as are usually they all, but yeah. I mention it whenever they're grueling, so you don't have to worry about me sort of sugarcoating these things if they're not worth it. But yeah, anyways, I may as well just wrap up. If you liked the video, do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking or not. Or of course, prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that, so all I can do is politely suggest it, which I believe I have done. It's the same deal. If you want to subscribe, go for it. I'd of course prefer if you did that, but you know, you don't have to. I'm not making you do it, and I can't make you do it. So you know where the subscribe button is. You've seen a YouTube video before, so I don't have to tell you where that is. It's below the video. And if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see me draw in the future, you could leave a comment. Do so politely. If you're going to do it, do so politely. And yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So with all that said, that's us. I will say goodbye and I will leave you. So, bye-bye.